Every fight is different. It's a new fight, so that's a weird question. That's like kind of like just like a dorky like online fan question. So like I don't really get how that would affect how I'm fighting a completely different fighter. You know what I mean? So I'm focused on what's happening on Saturday and on the task at hand for that.
Alright, so Jamal Hill just utterly embarrassed himself at the UFC Azerbaijan Media Day, and I'm not just kidding. These UFC reporters are terrible, bro. MMA journalism has never been great, but lately it's become one of the most embarrassingly low effort, low quality, and low IQ industries in all of sports media. Now, in a perfect world, the UFC would not threaten reporters with revoking their press passes if they asked a question that made them look bad, namely if they called out Dana on fighter pay. But I'm not even asking for this. I'm simply asking for these professional reporters to ask the fighters more interesting and just generally better questions. But instead, what we get are the same 10 recycled questions asked in rotation. You've got grown men with press passes asking things like, are you gonna try to knock him out? I don't know what the qualifications are these days for becoming a professional MMA journalist, but based on the questions that I hear from these guys week in, week out, I'm assuming that they're basically non-existent. And yeah, in this video, I'm gonna be talking about all this and more, but just keep in mind, I'm going to be talking about the reporters who haven't been blacklisted by the UFC, so Ariel Helwani and Luke Thomas aren't going to be mentioned, but I do have a video specifically for them planned.
How was your flight to Baku?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Flight
to Baku was great. Flight to Baku was great. It was pretty smooth. I found me a nice show to watch on the whole way over, so that was good, and that was good. First class, it's fine.
Bro, what's wrong with these people? Each reporter at any given press conference gets the chance to ask one, maybe two questions, and instead of actually trying to make the most of the opportunity, instead they'll ask the fighters questions like this. Who cares about his flight? Not even Jamal Hill cared about his flight. Just look at the way that he shook his head and looked off to the side after he ran out of things to say.
Hill, Alex and Prohaska's losses will affect this fight.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Alex and Prohaska's losses will affect this fight.
Look, man, I've made fun of Jamal on this channel before, and I think it was justified in doing so, but I can't help but feel bad for him watching him have to try and keep his cool throughout this shit show of a press conference. Also, I can appreciate the journalist for trying to ask his question in English, but if your English is gonna be that bad, then just use the translator. That's why they're there. Moreover, if this guy was really going to insist on asking his question in English, then how about you actually practice asking the question beforehand? This is what I mean. Most of these bozos are clearly not doing any prep work going into these events, because if this guy actually did any prep work instead of making stuff up on the spot, then he probably would have come up with a better question, and he absolutely would have delivered the question itself better too. This question here was just bad and lazy. I promise you that the guy who asked this question looked at Hill's Wikipedia page, noticed that he had 2 losses in a row, then came up with this question on the spot at the press conference.
Your and your opponent's last fights were very bloody, and during this media session, Khalil mentioned that he's not expecting to have any blood on his face. What do you think is going to happen on the 21st? What are your thoughts about it?
I'm glad that at least one half-decent question was asked here. It's not great, but there was at least some level of thoughtfulness into crafting it. In this one question, the reporter references how Hill and Rountree's previous fights with Alex Pereira went, then uses that to tie in what Khalil had to say about their upcoming fight, then asks for Jamal's take on the situation. There are layers to this question that were not at all present in any of the previous ones that I showed you, and you can definitely tell that Jamal was more receptive to answering this one just based on the look on his face as well as his response that he gave.
If he's not expecting to have any blood, then he's not really ready for war. You don't really understand what's in front of him, so he can expect that. So whenever I open his face up and he starts to see it, then we're gonna see what he does and how he reacts then. This guy gets hit more than he hits anybody. Like that's literally a stat of his whole career. Like, that's a wild statement.
I'm a big believer that when it comes to press conferences, the better questions will result in better answers. It's a very simple concept that even I, a guy with zero journalism experience, can understand. So it's shocking to me that we're 30 years into this sport, yet these professionals can't seem to wrap their heads around that. And then, of course, these guys completely destroy their momentum by following this up with yet another mundane, pointless question.
There was a photo on the social media. You were sitting back to back with Khalil in a WWE event, I guess. Was there any introduction that night? I know you told the story before in the UFC PI. You did an awkward encounter with you and Khalil.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, we were just there to watch the show. I mean, they just so happened to sit him there. I don't know this dude. Like, I don't know him. I don't speak to him. We've had no interactions, like anything like that. So it's like,
okay, thank you.
He's another guy in the room.
Jamal's body language at the end of his response really says a lot about how fed up he probably feels with this entire presser. This guy has been asked one decent question out of like 5 or 6 at this point, and I don't blame him at all for openly showing how irritated he is for them wasting his time. And although I'd love to say that these jokers did a better job at handling Khalil Rountree's press conference, that was absolutely not the case.
Congratulations on having your own custom shorts. You are one of the few people that have that. I know it's just shorts, but do you think it comes with a pressure?
Do I think it comes with pressure?
Yeah, having very few people that having your own custom shorts.
I don't feel any pressure at all.
So you're telling me that this journalist had the foresight to add the disclaimer of they're just custom shorts to his question and still thought it would be a good idea to ask that question? Bro, the answer to your question was in your question. They are just custom shorts. Why would there be added pressure to fight with them?
First one, you had no surgery after the Pereira fight. So it's been like 8 or 9 months, I guess. If it's not fully healed, how does that affect your defense? And do you plan to make up for it with power shots, etc.?
Yeah, I had no surgery after the fight, but it's fully healed.
You know, this is one of those times where I really get a hard reminder about how almost all of these reporters not only have no combat sports experience at all, even in terms of basic training, but they're also all nerds who actively avoid doing anything physical. How long do they think it takes a nose to heal? The guy had a nose surgery, not a fucking knee replacement. Now, I know that some of you guys might be saying that this was a one-off event and that I'm overreacting, but there's been a long history of the reporters in our sport acting like absolute clowns. In my opinion, the worst question of all time was this one when Robbie Lawler was asked this after he got knocked out by Tyron Woodley and lost his belt.
Was there any thought to maybe keeping him up because you know he's coming at you with the right hand? I mean, would you think like
first of all, he threw a jab, and when you throw a jab, I went to parry the jab, and then he went over the top. I mean, obviously, in hindsight.
Then you have this idiot who thought that Albert Tumanov was Robbie Lawler, even though Robbie wasn't even at the press conference at all.
For Robbie, please, Robbie, congrats. I wanted to ask you, there's a really cool moment there at the at the end of the fight where you guys kind of collapsed at the same time on the cage. Were you aware of that? I mean, what's going through your head and how do you feel in that moment? I'm sorry. So sorry. My bad.
You thought that was Robbie Lawler?
With the beanie, it threw me off. My bad.
You cover this sport? You thought that was Robbie Lawler?
There was this moron who asked a pretty bizarre and disrespectful hypothetical question to Robert Whittaker after he beat Ikram Aliskerov, who was a short-notice replacement for Hamzat.
Being cancelled, probably things would play differently. You would have to fight 5 rounds. You could possibly lose. Are you happy how things played out and now you had a really quick victory?
Mate, if I had wheels, I'd be a bike.
And then when Robin Hamzat actually did end up fighting at UFC 308, there was a reporter that asked this.
By physicality, he's a very uncomfortable opponent. He's tall. He's a really good wrestler. I'm looking right now at your team, and I don't see anybody who can replicate him. How do you feel about that?
I trained with tall guys at home. I just didn't bring them with me.
Again, I understand that Whittaker got demolished in the fight, but this was a dumb question. Like, do you expect him to bring his entire gym out to fight week? In a similar vein, we have this reporter who asked this question to Max Holloway leading into his fight with Ilia Topuria.
Max, Ilia is more complete than you, has more knockout power. Do you think you have any chance against Ilia Topuria?
I wouldn't be here if I didn't, brother. We get to find out come Saturday night, my guy. Tune in.
Obviously, there is nothing wrong with a reporter having their own set of predictions for upcoming fights, but what's up with these reporters so blatantly throwing shade at the fighters they're clearly rooting against? And for anybody in the comments saying that I'm just butthurt that Whittaker and Holloway lost those fights, I literally picked Hamzat and Topuria to beat them. Call me crazy, but I feel like professional reporters who are working on location shouldn't be clearly biased with who they're rooting for when they ask fighters questions, but that's just me. Anyways, then there was this creepy lady that asked GSP one of the most uncomfortable and cringe questions of all time.
What's the most offensive thing you've ever heard of a woman doing to one of your dolls? Because I've got a few.
Actually, you don't mind to come here and show it to me? I never seen it, if you don't mind.
It's beautiful.
Fortunately for us, most of the reporters that I just showed you are legit no-names who we've never heard from again. But unfortunately for us, I feel like the more renowned correspondents that we're stuck with are only marginally better. They are more professional, which is a good thing, I guess, but I think the trade-off for that is that they're fucking boring. For example, Brett Okamoto is ESPN's golden boy for MMA coverage, and yet somehow manages to be the least interesting guy in the entire industry. He asks the same 5 cookie-cutter questions in every fighter sit-down. How was camp? What would a win mean to you? How confident are you heading into Saturday? Then there's John Morgan, the guy that built his entire personality around being the guy who opens press conferences, as if jumping line means you're doing real journalism. Much like Okamoto, Morgan's questions are painfully predictable, often revolving around how excited everyone is, what the vibes are, or whether someone's ready to put on a show. The only time I've ever heard him ask a tough question was when he pressed Dana on Jon Jones, and that was only after Kevin Iole kicked things off, so he knew that he wouldn't be the guy that got in trouble first. And then we've got the schmo who somehow worked his way into the UFC's good graces. Also, if you guys aren't familiar with Nardwuar, then just know that the schmo shamelessly ripped off his entire gimmick. But the difference between him and Nardwuar is that Nardwuar is known for being one of the greatest interviewers in the music industry because his research is second to none, whereas the schmo is asking the same questions as everyone else, except he does it while dressed as the gay kid from your high school. But hey, I get it. When it comes to guys like Okamoto, Morgan, and the schmo, they're playing it safe. They're established guys who know that as long as they don't royally fuck up and do something stupid, they can just coast and keep doing what they're doing and make a living. That's not a bad thing at all. Everyone's got to make their dime, but seeing as these guys are somehow the gold standard of modern UFC journalism, it really speaks to how terrible MMA media has become. And just because they're established and the UFC likes them, it doesn't mean that they're not asking bad questions. If you are constantly asking every fighter that you interview the same exact question, then you as a journalist are not doing good journalism. And to just bring this video to a full circle here, a question that's been asked a million times before is almost always a bad question. But at the same time, a reporter can ask a question that's never been asked before, and it can still be a bad question. Biased questions are almost always bad, but at the same time, unbiased questions can end up being bad as well. Bad journalism can present itself in many different ways, but at the end of the day, a good reporter should be able to find ways between asking interesting questions while also not being weird and cringe. And on that note, MMA journalism has never been great, but it's been getting noticeably worse recently. Some of these clowns are UFC shills that couldn't come up with a creative question to save their lives, some of them are biased fans cosplaying as professional reporters, and some of them don't even seem like they watch the sport at all. Anyways, that's the video for today. Definitely let me know what you think about the press conferences for both Hill and Roundtree. Do you think that MMA journalism has become a joke, and are there any good reporters left who haven't been blacklisted by the UFC? As always, if you like the video, then like the video, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please do so. I appreciate you for watching, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.